From the University of North Dakota in Grand Forks, this is Studio One.
Hi everyone and welcome to Studio One. I'm Averi Haugesag.
And I'm Katy Wilson.
Today on the show, for many people, working from 9 to 5 is the norm. For a journalist, job hours may be much more extensive. We'll talk to a woman who spent more than 2 years on one story alone.
Also, think of a judge sitting in a courtroom. The image that comes to many people's minds may be changing, and we'll tell you why. But first, last month, GM was forced to recall more than 2.6 million vehicles due to ignition problems. The company's credibility level reached an all-time low. The automobile company has since then hired NASA to review safety precautions. They hope that with the help of NASA engineers, the company can regain trust. The recalled cars are in the process of being fixed and are expected to be back on the road in the next few months. Many medications that relieve headaches and sinus problems have a shelf life beyond its expiration date. New studies show that people can use pain relievers 5 to 10 years after its expiration. However, there are certain medications that should not be used after they expire, such as tablets used to fight heart disease and diabetes. The potency of these drugs needs to be at 100% in order for them to work. Experts urge patients to consult their doctor before using expired medications. Students are often told to sit still during the school day to get the most out of their education. The classrooms are set up in rows and students are discouraged from moving. Some schools are losing traditional classes like gym, music, and arts, restricting movement even more. Some teachers are bringing movement into the everyday classroom no matter what the subject. They argue that making students sit still creates behavior problems. Some educators say that education stems from experience.
They need to be able to express what they're doing through their bodies. The more hands-on movements through their learning, the better.
Some teachers are reorganizing their classrooms and making them activity-friendly. They are also planning activities that involve movement, such as scavenger hunts and dancing.
In the last 60 years, the average temperatures worldwide have increased about 1 degree Fahrenheit. This caused from an increase in atmospheric carbon dioxide and other emissions. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change recently released information on the assessment of climate change. This breaks down the expected impacts of climate change by continent and categories. Some of the categories include marine life, agriculture, and flood risks. The report will help policymakers see specific risks for different locations and adaptation techniques that could help. Researchers say that for some people, the effects will be much more catastrophic unless emissions can be reduced.
Some professions are dominated by a specific gender. Through history, law has been one of these occupations. Gender bias can become an issue in such careers, but there has been a transition.
For years, males mostly studied in these walls. That is just the way it was if you wanted to learn about law.
Women were really seen as a novelty.
This panel of professionals indicates that there has been change.
Women felt that there were barriers between them and virtually every professional step that they wanted to take.
Listening to the panels today, I think it's still very prevalent.
I think gender bias is out there, but I think it's changed over the years.
Attitudes towards women's roles in traditionally male-dominated professions have shifted as more have entered the workforce, and sometimes all it takes is one woman to trigger a trend.
In 1905, Helen Hamilton became the first woman to graduate from the University of North Dakota School of Law. Now today, more than 100 years later, there are equal numbers of men and women graduating from this school.
Very even in our class.
Law students like Meagen can look at Hamilton's past as inspiration for their future.
She graduated in 1905, 15 years before women could vote. And women they weren't able to practice law at that time.
Now, can that change? Absolutely, it can.
Some women in the field say the first 10 years are tough.
It's also the same time as you're having babies. There's the maternal wall. And I think the two together make it really tough as a young woman lawyer.
It's more about general respect for people.
Differences can create bias. The women on this panel share their common experiences because knowing you are not alone can help when working through any barrier. I am Katie Fletcher reporting for Studio One.
Helen Hamilton Day is an annual event hosted by the Law Women's Caucus. Hamilton was the only woman in her class and also class president in 1905. And that's the news for now.
All right, thanks, Katie. Let's go now to Tim Uhlmann for the weather news. Tim, how's it looking?
Thanks, Katie and Avery. In the southeast, especially Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia, they went through several thunderstorms recently, and those thunderstorms dropped quite a bit of rain, 7 inches in a very short period of time in some regions, and not necessarily all animals were able to get out of the water without some help. Now, the rain wasn't the only thing these storms brought to the region. A tornado swept through Covington County, Mississippi at about 2 in the morning, damaged several homes, and a few people also got injured. So we're heading towards tornado season, and it's important to be aware of that. And here we have the map for April of the probability of seeing tornadoes in your region. In eastern Texas, it's a concentration about 20%, but as we head towards the next upcoming months, that center actually shifts towards northern Texas, where we see a 40% chance. And as we get towards the later season, as the Gulf moisture makes its way north and we get warmer regions in the Midwest, that center actually comes up towards Colorado. Now, we might see tornadoes to have seasons change, but somehow the animals always have different cues.
Even if you didn't have a calendar, you'd be able to tell it was spring. The geese fly north, trees start to bud, flowers come up, and robins appear again. But how do they all know that spring has sprung?
A lot of them know based on daylight, photo period, how much sunlight they're receiving, how long the day is, and the intensity of the sunlight.
The length of day and angle of insolation are what makes the seasons change. More sun at a higher angle signals the start of spring. Most plants and birds react to the amount of sunlight they receive.
The hibernators, the ground squirrels and those guys have kind of an internal clock that goes off and starts them up and kind of gets them up and moving.
Chipmunks, skunks, and bears awake from their hibernation when a series of chemical reactions in their brains finishes. This restarts their metabolism and warms them back up. Geese migrate south in the fall when their water sources start to freeze up. What makes them come back north is still not known for sure.
My guess is it's probably temperature and day period where they're overwintering that triggers the shift back north.
We use the plants and animals around us to tell it's spring, and they use the changing amount of daylight. So really, it all revolves around the sun. This is Scott Wolf reporting for Studio One.
Cornell University actually has a program where people of the community can report in when trees are starting to bud in a program that they call Bud Burst. That brings us to our weather question of the week. What is the longest known path for a single tornado? Our answers range from 15 to 235 miles. And Avery, any one of those would be enough to go through most cities and towns.
Yeah, 15 miles is actually kind of a lot even, and that's the smallest number on the list.
That's
Thanks,
right.
Tim. Now we're going to head over to Katie Wilson for the sports story for today. Katie?
Thanks, Avery. The blur of a ball is all most people see as they skip past a bowling tournament on television. We found a group of young men who were bitten by the bowling bug.
It's hard to draw the line between concentration and chaos at a bowling tournament. David Call is one of those people periodically in deep concentration. When he isn't at a tournament, he concentrates on honing his skills, but the pins haven't always fallen so easily for him.
I just started 2 years ago. I started with a really low average and came in. Everybody docks me points because I don't throw with the thumb in the ball.
Some bowlers are recreational, others competitive. David and his team enjoy a little bit of both.
Tournaments are always fun. Like, you get a group of guys together that are on a team all year long.
The bond between us is actually really good, surprisingly enough. My buddy David, that I've known for 15 years, brought me out here and kind of gave me my first bowling ball and said, "Here, go."
Austin is considered a rookie, with only 3 months of bowling experience to his name.
It's the first tournament I've actually been to, so being able to actually come in and bowl a state tournament like this on a tough shot like this and bowling as well as I did, I was actually really proud of it.
Like Austin, David is also somewhat new to competitive bowling.
Favorite tournament was probably when I threw my first 300 coming in, and I had only been bowling for a year. Everybody was sitting behind me waiting for it to happen, and everybody was cheering me after finally all the pins went down.
Moments like David's 300 are rare, but these events are where the magic happens.
Every time we come back, it's always a fun weekend just to come out and get away from everybody.
Tournaments are hosted to see who is best.
Come on, get in there, kid.
This group of guys chooses to focus on the bigger picture: teamwork, camaraderie, and of course, having fun. With photographer Alex Stadnick, I'm Marty Mueller.
Soon after David moved to North Dakota, he recruited his high school buddies to do the same. As a result, the majority of the Rock Solid team is originally from California. And that's our sports story for today's show. You know, Avery, it would take me a lot more than 3 months to bowl on a team.
Yeah, I am not a very good bowler. All right. Though technology has its benefits, many say it also has its downfalls. Next, we will talk to a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter who has seen these changes affect face-to-face conversations and also the content of your newspaper.
Closed captioning for Studio One is underwritten in part by NDAD, helping others to help themselves.
North Dakota is facing challenges in healthcare delivery. The University of North Dakota School of Medicine and Health Sciences is building a place to help meet the state's healthcare needs. In addition to a new structure, we're also building interaction between healthcare professionals while building a workforce through expanding class sizes. We're inspiring our youth to engage in healthcare careers and exploring ways to reduce disease. It starts here and ends here, building a better future for North Dakota.
At the University of North Dakota College of Engineering and Mines, classes have real-life application. Mentors guide students. Our work improves quality of life by answering tough questions with creativity and innovation. The University of North Dakota College of Engineering and Mines, training tomorrow's engineering and geology experts today.
The University of North Dakota College of Business and Public Administration, connecting vision to innovation.
Studio One closed captioning is underwritten in part by Options, your disability information source.
The 1987 St. Paul Pioneer Press series, AIDS in the Heartland, is a story that has had a shelf life for almost 30 years. The story depicts a gay couple in the Midwest during the 80s and their relationship and eventual death from AIDS. Pulitzer Prize-winning feature journalist Jackie Bonashinsky is with us to talk about that story and other experiences throughout her time in the field. Thanks for coming on the show today, Jackie.
Thanks, Avery.
So can you kind of tell me what made you what started your interest in journalism?
Sure. Well, I'm from a really small town in northern Wisconsin. Grew up in the 50s in sort of a sheltered, little environment, very old world, Polish community. And it was before Title IX, and girls didn't have access to a lot of the things that I otherwise would have been interested in, and I wasn't interested in being a nurse or marrying the local farmer, although he was really cute. But we had my high school puts out it still does, it puts out the Legal Village newspaper, and so I started working on the newspaper in high school, had some affinity to it, and I realized it was a way for me to have a less traditional career, to see the world, to kind of have an excuse to learn something every day and to get nosy about other people's lives.
So then you were a journalist in your high school town. So what is your current position right now? What do you do?
I'm teaching now. I'm teaching at the University of Missouri School of Journalism, and then I have a faculty appointment at the Poynter Institute in Florida, which is a school for professional journalists. Okay. And then I work with journalists as a coach and editor and teacher around the world. I kind of go where people are trying to figure out how to do better journalism. A lot of work in the developing world and in the old Soviet bloc countries, China, places like that.
Now, you've won a Pulitzer Prize for a story called AIDS in the Heartland.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about the story, and then also kind of the biggest thing that you learned while you were doing this story? Because I imagine there's a lot of lessons behind it.
Yeah, boy, that's a good question. The story it came out of the fact that I was covering a beat we called Women and Minority Affairs, and I included at the time gays because they were a political and social minority. And it just happened that when I was doing that, the HIV/AIDS virus sort of presented itself and became the crisis it was. And so we decided we really wanted to do that story right, and one of the stories we conceived was a diagnosis to death story, to try to give readers more perspective on what it was like to be someone living and dying with AIDS at a time when it was probably the biggest stigma and the biggest excuse for discrimination in the country at the time.
Sensitive topic, for sure.
Yeah, very, very, very much so.
So how did you approach it when it was that sensitive?
You get to know people and you trust them, and you're very honest with them about what it is you want to do. So when we finally found the right people, Dick Hansen and Bert Henningsen, we were just very honest about what we wanted to do and why and what it would mean to them, both pro and con. And the fact that it would give them a voice and give this issue that they were very, obviously very invested in, a voice. And then you're just incredibly honest with people, and you give them time, and you put things in context, and you ask them every question you can possibly think of, and then you make respectful decisions about what story needs to be told to serve readers.
Now, being a professor like you are now, and I assume that you talk to students a lot about your story ideas, because a lot of them are very creative. I know I've looked some of them up online and whatnot. So how do you come up with those?
Curiosity. You just keep yourself open to the world all the time and wonder about it and pay attention not to what you think and how you're reacting to, but what you'd love to know and to what other people want to know. So you're just constantly kind of walking around and wondering about things. I call it living your life in the form of a question.
So what is your very favorite story you've ever written then, and why?
Oh, I don't know if I have a favorite. It changes. I'm very fond of a piece I did once about a World War II veteran and his son who was a Vietnam veteran, and they had very, very similar experiences in the war. They were both long-range reconnaissance patrols in the jungles of Asia. But when they came back from their respective wars, they came back to a very different country, and they became very estranged and had not talked to each other for years and years and years. And I ended up interviewing both separately and doing sort of a parallel of how similar their experiences were and how differently it turned out for both of them. And they ended up talking to each other again. And the story never won any awards, but it meant a lot to me because these two men were willing to share something and then to look past where they were stuck and say, maybe we ought to reconsider this.
That's awesome. So what are some of there's been a lot of changes with technology, clearly. Do you think a lot of those have affected the journalism field?
Yeah, unfortunately. I mean, I think some of them are great. I think back, and if I were doing AIDS in the Heartland today, it would be great to have these guys' voices, for you to be able to listen to the voice and the timbre of a person as he's dying over the course of several months. That would be phenomenal. A lot of the technology is better tools. You can do better storytelling. It gives you so much more richness. Yeah. Right now, one of the downsides of the technology is it's turning us into speed demons who don't have time to stop and think and invest time in the field because it's all about speed. And so that's creating some issues, I think, with accuracy. We're creating an echo chamber where you just keep passing stuff along. I think we'll get through that, but we're not there yet.
Yeah. So you don't really get to take the time to get to know people, I suppose.
A lot of the journalists I know still in the field complain about that they're just constantly having to post and to curate and to aggregate as opposed to doing original reporting. And the world needs original reporting more than ever.
So my last question for you is, what kind of appeals to you about journalism and the field itself?
I think there's a real value to doing what we call the first draft of history and having people whose job it is to do nothing but find and tell the story honestly and as independently as possible, as opposed to having an agenda beyond finding and telling the story. I think that you cannot eradicate how important that is. You can't get rid of that because it serves literally as our first draft of history.
All right, fabulous. Thanks for being on the show today,
Avery.
Jackie. Coming up, Americans serving in the military often put their lives in danger. Some end their career with injuries from service. We'll sit in on an event that aims to help those who are injured protect freedom.
Studio One closed captioning is underwritten in part by Options, your disability information source.
It's not the size of the woman in the fight. It's the size of the fight in the woman.
Some consider graduation the end of the college experience. For others, it's just the beginning.
And the university provided an environment where I could grow.
And many years after I graduated, I'm still receiving dividends from my experience as a student at UND.
The University of North Dakota Alumni Association is committed to growing the university by growing the alumni family.
At the University of North Dakota College of Engineering and Mines, classes have real-life application. Mentors guide students. Our work improves quality of life by answering tough questions with creativity and innovation. The University of North Dakota College of Engineering and Mines, training tomorrow's engineering and geology experts today.
Admire the faculty. They're the ones that kind of helped push me through this.
Courses are hands-on and interactive. The communication program has so many different facets to it. One of the great things about the staff in the communication department is that they love what they do. They encourage you to really critically think and analyze everything you're learning. They're so into it, and it makes you want to be into it.
If you would like to attend a live show, go to our website at studio1.und.edu.
The NFL Draft is a life-changing day for young athletes with professional football dreams. In this film, Kevin Costner plays the general manager of the Cleveland Browns. On the first day of the draft, he must fight to get the #1 pick. This is his only chance to rebuild the team. As a general manager, he must decide what he's willing to sacrifice. The line between his personal and his professional life become blurred. Filmmakers capitalized on the built-in drama of draft day.
Moving up to draft day, you have all the time in the world. Once draft day starts, it's every 10 minutes. And the order of things can be completely screwed up if somebody does something unconventional.
Producers partnered with the NFL and the Cleveland Browns team. The crew had access to Browns and several other meetings with the league. Draft day opens in theaters Friday, April 11th with a PG-13 rating. It can be challenging to travel with kids. A trip planning website called GoGoBot allows travelers to plan, book, and share information about vacation destinations. The best kids attractions in the U.S. were chosen by these users. They include Worlds of Wizardry, bat-covered bridges, and tours by train. We wanted to know what your favorite vacation place was as a kid.
My favorite childhood vacation was we used to go to Disney World after we went to Pensacola. My uncle was stationed in Pensacola for the Navy.
Valley Fair was probably one of the most exciting trips that stand out as a child.
Probably Modesto, California. We went down there every summer to see my grandma.
When we lived in Arizona and we would go up north and stay at a cabin, and we were up there for a week and we got to go hiking and went through a couple of different national parks out there.
We went to Duluth for my rock climbing tournament, and then it was really fun going skiing after.
Probably when I went to Disneyland in California, probably because it's you watch all those awesome movies when you're little and things like that, and you finally get to go and see all that come to life.
A comment from our Facebook page from John from Rochester, Minnesota says, Wonder Lake, Denali National Park, Alaska. My family and I took a 5-hour bus ride through the park. Hopefully someday I can take my son there and we will make sure to bring our fishing gear. Grant from Denver, Colorado says, Outer Banks, North Carolina. Renting a beach house with the whole family for a week. Great memories.
Auctions consist of items, the auctioneer, and the people bidding on the items. We found an auction that supports those who serve their country.
The auctioneer sets the mood. Today, that mood is competitive. As items leave their table, their new owners celebrate a win-win.
The cause wins, the veterans win. And to me, that's probably more important than anything.
Stephen is a member of the Disabled American Veterans, or DAV. He earned his membership more than 40 years ago in Vietnam.
Was not a serious candidate for going to college at the time. And so I signed up.
After the war, Stephen says he grew up.
I think I gained a little insight into a grown-up world.
And in this grown-up world, some veterans need help when they come home. The DAV is an organization that provides advocacy and assistance.
It allows us to mingle with the community who greatly supports us because they believe in everything that the DAV does.
This auction has its fair share of bidding wars.
It's this kind of camaraderie that happens when you have a service-built organization. We've all been through some tough times. Anytime you go through a war.
Stephen says the DAV has helped with those harder times. This auction collected many items for sale, but it also gave an opportunity to help others move forward. With photographer Eirik Nielsen Brotley, I'm Christiana Dogan reporting for Studio One.
This auction is only one of the events the DAV hosts throughout the year. Anyone who was injured, gassed, or disabled during duty is eligible to join the DAV.
All right, thanks, Katie. Now Tim joins us in our studio with a final look at the weather. Tim?
Thanks, Katie and Avery. Now we're getting into that time of the year where we go through these warm and cold cycles, and after that warmer than average week for the Midwest, we're looking at cooler than average from the northern central plains down through the south. Drier than average for precipitation for the southwest and northern central plains, wetter than average in the southeast all along the coast. Brings us back to our weather question of the week. What is the longest known path for a single tornado? Our answers range from 15 to 235, and the answer was actually 235 miles. It happened in 1925. It's known as the Tri-State Tornado that went from Missouri to Indiana.
Oh, that's crazy. I didn't think a tornado could go that far.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tim. And that's our show for today. As always, you can follow us through social media or get more information on our website. From all of us at Studio One, have a great week.
We'll see you next time.
Thank you.